Happy Sunday and welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you guys here live on this Sunday evening. Welcome to all of you who are joining for this reading. It is so good to be back to doing the educational work that helps keep me invigorated. So guys, good to see you guys. If you guys have not noticed, that Jaybefaunt channel is also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there typically on Sundays for the JB show and Sundays for the Savvy and JB show, and then here on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific. If you guys would like to, please go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out very much to be able to reach more people so that we can all learn better together. Also, if you guys would like to, you guys can also subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. Gives you email notifications whenever I upload articles, or if I have any clips or any live streams that you guys would like to check out as well. And also, if you would like for me to react to any questions you have via video, or react to any videos that you want me to video react to, you guys can do that by sending it through QBounty at qbounty.com/Jaybefaunt. So you guys have that there. As well as, I got something in the description now so you guys can take a look at. But a lot of people don't know, I do have a link tree. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also go into my link tree. Here is my link tree here. It is also in the description if you guys would like to. My latest streams that come up on this channel and also on RBN, as well as you see my merch store, my Twitter, TikTok, Kick channel, Instagram, and many other different socials and ways to get to help support the channel as well. So thank you so much to everybody for that as well. And you guys have been great in keeping me basically solidified. So see, there it goes. I just updated it. So yeah, there we go. I absolutely love the design that I made. Yes, I did design myself. So thank you so very much for that. Let's get into some of the comments to say hello, and then we will get into the reading for today. All right. First off, we have Kime coming in saying, JB in the place to be, and he's got what it takes to rock the mic, right? Looking all skinty in the face in the best way. Keep up the good work, comrade. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm trying to get that, that face. All right. We have Miguel coming in saying, peace. Let me check to see if we have any viewers on the Rumble side to see. And also if they are on the Kick side. Looks like we're pretty good. They're a little bit quiet. That's okay. All right. Good to see you anyway. All right. So what we're going to get into today, let's check out the thumbnail. You guys know exactly what time it is. You guys stood in line for it. Well, let's get into it. We're going to be reading Of Water and the Spirit, Ritual, Magic, and the Initiation and the Life of an African Shaman by Malidoma, Patrice. We're going to be getting in to the end of chapter 5 and the beginning of chapter 6. We're going to be jumping into. And one of the things that I really want everybody to hone in on when it comes to reading these is I want you to start thinking about imperialism and colonialism. This is very important. So this is one of the reasons why I'm actually reading this book, is because it has the intersections with what Malidoma has with the Dagara tribe, and how it intersects with his being raised within colonialism and how that affects his worldview. So we're going to be getting into that. We're going to be starting on page 95. And so we're pretty much almost in the middle of the book. So we're going to start on page 95. And we're going to be doing the last part of this chapter. It says, in the white man's world. So we're going to be going from that into chapter 6. So you guys got your tea, you got your water, you got your cookies. Get ready and sit back and let's read on. The one exception to the harsh rule on the mission hill was Zan, our religious instructor. His afternoon lessons were in striking contrast to Montier's morning terrorism. Zan's task was to prepare us for communion. Though he could not read, he taught us how, out of his prodigious memory, we learned morning prayers in Dagara and evening prayers in Latin. Though Zan did not know what the prayers in Latin meant, it did not seem to matter much. for he would always make up a story to explain them. Zan laughed in relating stories from the Bible. He used to tell us when Mary became pregnant with Jesus, his father Joseph was surprised. Somebody had figured out a way to get Mary pregnant without his knowing. Mhm. When Mary's belly started to protrude, the same person would tell her that her husband, that God had made it the only way he knew how, by immaculate conception. Zan found everything funny. I wondered why he even stayed in the mission if everything was a joke to him. I never figured it out, but I was convinced that Zan was there with us for a very good reason. This man was our last contact with our roots. He did not know how to be serious in the face of anything. He saw the whole world as a story, a funny story, and he thought that what you couldn't understand was not meant to be understood. Although Zan had translations for the prayers in Latin, he did not believe in them, so he would make some up. In this manner, he might have believed that he was preserving the arcane mystery and power of Latin. After all, when he was a boy, his Dagara elders had not provided translations when they conducted their rituals in primal language. There was one prayer he spent a long time teaching us. The prayer ran like this: In mali tuas domin comment du spiritu meo. And the footnote reads, In manas tuas domin commendo spiritum meum, or so basically that's what that was. Zan translated as, I want to follow Domine, which translates to the Dagara way of calling somebody whose name is Dominique. So I wanted to follow Domine once again to see if he will give me something to drink. Zan thought he could adapt this phrase to Dagara since the word sounded strangely like that language. He did not think that Father Melo knew the meaning of the words anyway. But Zan often wondered who Domini might be. He told us it was probably one of Father Melo's close friends. He himself knew somebody in his own village by that name, but he was sure that person could not possibly be close friends of Father Melo. So Zan concluded that Dominique must be living somewhere across the sea. Zan's teachings were a process of discovery both for him and his students. Catechism was a series of questions and answers. Zan would ask the question, then provide the answer along with a funny comment before asking us to repeat after him. One of the catechism questions was, who created man? The answer Zan gave us was, God created man along with everything else. But Zan always added that God created drinks too, not for Father Melo only, but for everybody. And that meant for him too. Zan was always complaining that Father Melo drank all the holy wine on the grounds, so it was not enough for everybody. So it looks like Father Melo had his daily dose of Merlot. You know what I mean? Father Melo was getting magical. Although I enjoyed Zan's teachings much better than Monsieur's, I learned very little from him about the Bible until I was able to read it myself. Once I learned to read, it became a wonderful escape. Books were a world into which we were authorized to escape, though we always had to come back to reality. In the meantime, I had become accustomed to a life without my real parents, especially since I was able to speak a little French after the first year on the Mission Hill. I was now finding it difficult to remember how to speak Dagara. This is how imperialism and colonialism works, is that they acclimate you to their culture and they don't help you preserve your own, so then you forget your culture. And that is what happened to a lot of people in many different areas. Like, for instance, the primary language spoken in Burkina Faso, where this book actually takes place, is French. And that's for a reason. Why do we all speak English in the United States? Why do people of Taino descent speak Spanish? Why do people of, whether it be Sioux, Iroquois, Seminole, you know, um, many different Native American nations, why do they speak English? And how many of them know the ancient language that their ancestors spoke? See what I mean? So that's part of colonialism. It erases, it acclimates you to what their way of speaking, their way of living, but it tells you to erase where you came from. Mhm. It took a man like Montier to make me fluent in French. His imagination for finding insidious ways to make us learn had no bounds. After Father Melo heard us greet him in French, he declared that speaking Dagara at school was now a sin. So Montier declared Dagara illegal within the precinct of the mission. To enforce this new law, he found a goat skull and tied a rope to it so it could be hung around the neck of a transgressor. He called it the symbol. Whoever found it guilty of uttering a word in Dagara was to wear this ugly skull around his neck until the next pupil was caught sinning. It's crazy how somebody can just determine whatever they want to be a sin, a sin. It's as if they're not really interested in what God says. They just want to use it as a means to control other people. Let's continue on. To liberate himself, the sinner had to listen for a misused word, speaking poor French, also counted as sin for Dagara's word that had slipped into a French sentence. When someone erred, the symbol wearer would declare him a sinner, and with the help of his comrades would transfer the skull. People who are Latino, um, you ever heard somebody use say they speak in Spanglish? So they're speaking Spanish, but then they'll use English words, or how many people who are Latino who were speaking Spanish, but then they throw in an English word in there. You know what I mean? That would be considered a sin according to Father Melo. See how strict it was? It's crazy. One night in the dormitory, we were talking about the way our lives had changed since we came to the Mission Hill. Slayton said he did not even remember his real traditional name anymore, though he wished he could be called by this name once in a while because it would help him recall his home. I found his forgetfulness outrageous, and I said, I can't imagine that I would ever forget that my Dagara name is Malidoma. The current unfortunate bearer of the symbol, Clauder, promptly declared me a sinner because I had spoken Dagara by uttering my traditional name. Everybody agreed with him because Malidoma is primarily a Dagara word before being somebody's name. So, in the middle of the night, they hung the hideous object around my neck. That was the first time I experienced the horror of living with the symbol. The rope was itchy and too short, and the skull itself had a terrible odor because it was still in the final stages of decomposition. It was very hard for me to get sleep. So imagine being named Jose, and they change your name and you go, yeah, I would never forget that my name was Jose. And then they go, oh, you just sinned. Nobody in English is called Jose, right? Or if somebody said, my name is Angelica, it's like, no. Mm-mm. Or Juan. You know what I mean? Imagine having a name and then you get punished for speaking just a name because it was derived from a different language. It's wild, right? The skull had other applications beyond the simple fear it produced. It was a memory enhancer. The wearer of the symbol became a spy, a listener, an observer. The symbol functioned like an extension of Montier, who had invented it to make sure that we didn't limit our apprenticeship to a few daily sessions with him. So we learned and studied hard because we did not want to wear the symbol, yet it was always with us, a terrible presence. Somebody always had to wear it. It could not switch necks until one of us spoke Dagara by mistake. So our intellectual life was ruled by the symbol and by Montier. And we learned fast. Understanding did not matter. The symbol did not give us time for that. Years later, when I was a student in the seminary, I would think back on the symbol and realize that human ingenuity is boundless at times of threat. There's no limit to productivity in those times. He who wore the symbol was asked to be more creative than the rest. He had to play the devil's advocate and also the trickster. He had to engage all of us in conversation, waiting for one of us to slip. It becomes a self-preservation technique based in trauma. Life presents us with an infinite number of choices. Discipline is perhaps a way of narrowing them down. But to learn to limit one's choices, one must first have a special goal. When I was at the mission, I never knew what my goal was supposed to be. My life had been taken away from me because during the years I was there, the institution assumed that its goal was my goal. The result was, of course, the slow death of my identity and the understanding that I was an exile from everything I held dear. Remember, Malidoma was 4 when he got kidnapped. And I say kidnapped on purpose. A Jesuit priest kidnapped Malidoma. A Jesuit missionary kidnapped a 4-year-old boy. I would like to tell you more details of my years at Mission Hill, but for the most part, it was a child's dream journey. Most of its episodes have been buried deep in my unconscious mind and cannot be remembered. As an adult, I have learned that this state of mind is not uncommon for children raised without parents by caretakers who really do not love them. The memories of these children become undependable, flat, and one-dimensional like paper. I began to wake up from the dream around the age of 12, when Father Melo decided that we were old enough to be sent to the seminary of Nancy, Nancy. I remember the night I arrived there by truck with a dozen other graduates of the mission school. My first impression was of a harsh brightness caused by the rows of floodlights that lined the road that led to the seminary. The driver of the truck stopped at the main building, a tall, brightly illuminated brick house. A priest came out and spoke with the driver. Then we were taken into the guest quarters. An immense dormitory lined with metal beds that seemed to go on indefinitely. Some were occupied by sleeping bodies, others were empty. The priest assigned beds and ordered us to sleep immediately. My first bed faced the entrance door. It there was a straw mat on it and a blanket. I had never seen anything like it before, nor have I since. I was made it was made of 4 steel bars, about 3 inches in width and 5 feet in length. I put my bag underneath the bed and stretched out on it. The straw mat was not firm enough to keep me from falling in between the bars, and with a loud cracking noise, I found myself wedged between the two of them. Overcome by exhaustion, I went to sleep without trying to dislodge myself. Before we left the mission hill, Father Malo told us that our years there had us with an provided us with an adequate preparation for the next step in a journey towards encountering Christ. How strange it sounded to be meeting Christ through the agency of literacy. The day the truck came to pick us up, the father was so happy and so proud that of all of us that he couldn't stop smiling. A crowd had gathered, some out of curiosity because they had never seen a truck, others because this was a distraction from their heavy work. My longing for my family never stopped while I lived at the Mission Hill, even though I could not remember when I had seen my parents for the last time. For some strange reason, the memory of grandfather was even more vivid than of my parents. I could feel him around me in ways I cannot explain. This feeling was not there when I thought about my mother and my father. As I took the 120-mile journey to the seminary, every mile seemed like to deepen my separation from them. So that's the end of chapter 5. And this basically just shows how when you're stripped of your identity and forced to live a life that is outside of your culture, it becomes conditioning. And this is why when you think about kids who are abused at home, and let's say those kids are being taken away from their abusive parents to be given an opportunity to maybe live in a better place or foster home or what have you, the kids don't want to leave because it's a mind process of, no, this person loves me, even though, they're putting me through abuse. You can't separate me from them. I forget exactly the name of the syndrome, but you guys can probably tell me in the chat. But this happens quite often. Someone who suffers abuse from someone else, and yet they still don't want to leave. This happens in domestic violence cases as well. We're going to move on to chapter 6, part 1. This begins on page 99. It says, life begins at Nancy. So we're going to take a look here. Life begins at Nancy. The boarding school was a fortress, a state within a state, bursting out of nowhere, a garden of order within the chaos of the African jungle. Rows of houses more beautiful even than Father Malo's mission house were spread out among trees, gardens, and flower pathways. Their stone concrete walls, painted bright glittering white, shocked the eye and intimidated the newcomer. They were all covered with tin roofs, and most of them had wooden ceilings. Next to the teacher's residence, the church was the tallest. The chapel was built of cement rocks and steel. Its high ceiling was a complex obelisk of steel on top of which was laid with a metallic cover that resonated loudly when it rained. Then came the classrooms and the dormitories, each of which contained over 100 of the Spartan metal beds. Each classroom was big enough for 80 students, although a good 100 were sometimes stuck in during the morning classes. In all, the institution contained well over 500 children, aged 12 to 21. This titanic religious establishment was a dream come true of the missionary crusade that had followed imperialism into the continent of Africa. The kids came from everywhere in the French West Africa, Mali, Niger, Togo, the Ivory Coast, and Benin. Some were brought They're fresh from baptism after a few years of parochial brainwashing. Others, schooled privately as the proteges of white missionaries, arrive there still longing for their white father. There were two sections to this religious campus. We call them divisions. First division, named Roman Campus, was occupied by about 300 kids from 12 to 16. It consisted of an immense classroom building, two dormitories, and a spiritual lecture hall. The lecture hall was where we met every evening at 7 to hear the priest lecture on a religious subject, usually the life of some European saint whose anniversary fell on that day. Some student usually bore the same name as the saint, in which case it was that person's birthday too. We did not have formal birthdays, since being baptized meant being born a lot cleaner, which is why our traditional name was replaced by a new and better Christian name. The anniversary of that saint was also the birthday of the student who had borrowed his name. Evening lectures were tedious. To listen to God on an empty stomach was like refraining from laughter at the grimace of a monkey. Thanks to one freedom we had to daydream, it was possible to endure the lecture. If for most part we looked attentive, the priest did not care very much what we did as long as there was silence. There were three classrooms in the school building. The first, the septieme, was for the newly arrived seminarians who had been taught everything from composition and geography to mathematics and science. French was the language that carried all this baggage. The second classroom, the 6eme, was reserved for those who had arrived first year in the institution. The third classroom housed the 5eme, those preparing to enter the upper division, with the students called the Greek campus. The same subjects were taught to everybody, but according to their appropriate levels. The upper division had 5 classrooms instead of 3 and was housed in 2 dormitory buildings similar to the size of those of the lower division. Their classroom building was adjacent to ours. The refectory stood alone, away from the dorm and the school. Divided into 2 sections, it belonged to both divisions. The upper division boys, the Greeks, did not like to mix with the Romans, nor were the 2 groups authorized to mix outside of school hours. The Greeks had their own spiritual lecture hall, situated next to their classroom building, and an extra structure called the mechanics building, where all kinds of skilled activities, sewing, weaving, woodworking, metalworking, and indoor athletics, took place every Thursday and Sunday afternoon. The higher division ranged from 1 to 200 teenagers and students in their early 20s. In front of the classroom building was the basketball court, the athletic field, and the soccer field. There was no library. Each teacher had a sizable collection of books sufficient for specific intellectual and spiritual needs of the subject he taught. Each teacher taught one subject. All books were in French. Second language training included English, even though there was no book about it. Latin was a requirement, but it too had no book. There was no German or any other European language taught. The students were encouraged to borrow books from the teacher. One thing was certain: this coming together of all of us, not just strangers from the same tribe, but strangers from many different tribal communities, demonstrated the possibility of unity amid tribal diversity. Suddenly, French became useful far beyond its power to introduce us to literacy. It became a means of linking us to each other. It was our only bond with the heterogeneous community assembled by the Jesuits. There was no need to enforce the speaking of French here or to ban the use of local languages. Most of us had none because we could remember, because none could remember. And besides, who would understand them? Because my Dagara friends from the mission school were scattered throughout the mass of kids in the seminary, it was not easy for us to stick together. The seminary at Nancy had appropriated the name of the land of a nearby village occupied by a tribe whose members watched the whole maneuver, astonished and speechless, horrified at being politely asked to quit their own land. But in the eyes of the Jesuits, how could such a theft be considered a crime? Who would dare to question the divine need for land? The students had no contact with the villagers. Only the priest who ran the seminary did, and that took the form of a church in the village. Remind you of someplace particular? Land theft from religious folk. Hmm. Within the institution, the smell of France and its impressive order prevailed menacingly, yet majestically amid the stubborn surviving perfume of the wild. No one could survive in an institution like this unless he developed a habit of removing his mind from the vocation that had been imposed upon him. The steel structure of his very architecture spoke resolutely to each student about the might of God the white man served. The seminary had ripped nature from its order and reordered it into concrete houses, into paths, lawns, flower gardens, canals, and roads, into new beauty that man served assiduously because it was divine. Outside of the institution's boundaries, we could smell the unmediated perfume of the wild and a glimpse of the cold, silent beauty of its mysterious order. We often went out on botanical field trips, identifying and studying an endless variety of plants. Way off in the distance, carefully separated from the boys, was the Novetiae? I'm terrible with words. A similar but smaller institution for girls, but it'll be years before we enjoyed any contact with that place. This is a day of miracle and wonder, a day when our Lord Jesus Christ had been proven once again that his historic death on the cross was not in vain. Dead because he wanted to save his children from perdition. He is now resurrected to prove that he meant what he did, that his suffering was a commitment. The Lord died with you in mind. Thus you are Christ's chosen disciples, endowed with the vocation of the priesthood to rescue, in the manner of the apostles, the erring souls of your brothers and sisters, and to return them to the divine path. It was a hot Easter day in the seminary of Nancy. The Mass was more solemn than usual because Easter marks the peak time in the calendar, sometimes on the same level as Christmas, but sometimes considered higher because birth is common and resurrection is not. Above all, it was the end of Lent, which for most of us was a period of gastronomic deprivation. During Lent, the school was vegetarian, and for a lot of us, this was dreadful. Why eat grass because God was in pain and needed us to support him by some form of deprivation? Father Superior was presiding over the Mass, which was concelebrated by the entire professional corps, all Jesuits, dressed in majestic chasuble with crosses at front and back. Father Superior displayed the dramatic flair in all his movements. Oh, he sounds like he displayed some flair, honey. You know how they like to dress, but especially with the shoes and the accessories. You know what I'm saying, right? As he himself wore the center of the event and the attendant in the crowd, his celebrants looked dedicated too. Each one knew his role so well that he performed it almost mechanically. For the past 10 years or so, Father Superior had been the sole leader of the Nancy Resurrection Mass. As a director of his impressive institution, he always presided over the masses and often delivered homily after the gospel was read by another colleague. Ordinarily, Father Superior spoke about the meaning of the Christian holiday that was being celebrated. He often compared Christ's resurrection to Africa's awakening into Christ. and never missed an opportunity to glorify the Jesuit order for splendid achievements of Black Africa. To him, every man and woman who was brought to the baptismal font was a resurrected being following the example of Christ, an example of the appropriateness of religious colonialism in Black Africa. But this day, for some reason, breaking his own rules, he decided to speak about our vocation. So here they are trying to spin colonialism as a good thing and saying it's deliverance. The kidnappings, the stripping of culture by force, by duress, and they make an excuse for it. Funny thing is, the Bible actually says that God doesn't want people coming but with hesitation. He wants them to come willingly. So forcing people to come, forcing people to become followers of Jesus is actually wrong, even by biblical standards. You are candidates within a very special discipleship in Christ's community. Not only have you been baptized in his name, but you will dedicate your lives to the service of his cause. This is important because our world is crumbling and torn apart by the work of Satan and his many followers throughout this land of God. Born sinners, your people grew in sin. Your people grew in sin. This motherfucker. They cultivated a fellowship that glorified in this practice of those very acts that every day kill our Lord Jesus Christ, who died precisely for these macabre sins. But do you know why these sinners still live? They live because they are still given the chance to repent and to be saved. I suppose there's no need to say that every simple action you perform here in this holy place increases the chances of their salvation, as well as bringing it closer to hand. The bulk of your task resides there among with the disciples of evil who are every day blackened by the blood of Satanism, stone worship, false beliefs, and attachments to a world structure devoid of sanctity. While these conditions still exist, you must not sleep until the light of resurrection is brought forth to them. This is the calling of which you must respond. This is the light you must intensify and keep alive every day. This is the good news you must bring out and disseminate to your people. As they suffocate in the steel grip of the devil's hand, only you can come to their rescue because Christ was resurrected for you. This is your calling. Father Superior had a way of making you feel sorry, anxious, and guilty. I wonder how I could possibly go tell my people to drop their age-old traditional habits of belief and be prepared to be saved because somebody had died for them without even telling them. It had been so long since I had left these people that I could barely remember how wicked their spiritual life supposedly was. Was it that they were doing... What was it that they were doing wrong in the first place? And in any case, will they recognize me wearing a white robe and a rosary when and if I return to them? Though Nancy was sealed away from the outside world, many stories about the deeds that the colonials had slipped in. For example, the nearby village missionaries had attempted to convert the people by using the symbol of Christ on the cross. One unfortunate man had taken the risk of objecting. "This man is not black," he said. "He never came to any black village. No one among his disciples was black. So how could he have died for us too? Are you trying to transfer the guilt of your ancestors upon us? Look, your ancestors killed somebody they should not have killed. Then they found out this man was a divine man. So they decided to share their regret with the rest of the world. Our ancestors never told you, our ancestors never told us that you had committed such a crime against humanity. And if this man was a god, Mother Earth would have told us about it before you arrived here. Be clear about what you're saying. Oh, snap. I hope he's alive. Wait for it. It may or may have not been a coincidence that this man fell into the hands of the territorial army and nothing was ever heard of him again. Mm. Then priests went. Was it a calling to have been grabbed by Father Milo out of my parents' compound while they were away working, to have been driven to the mission on a BMW and to this seminary light years away from home just so I can go tell them later that they should believe in Christ? These were the thoughts that were always with me after I came to the Nancy Seminary. Boy, I'm telling you, and this is the result of colonialism. They will use religion to justify colonial practices. And that's it. That's the reading of the beginning of chapter 6. But it just goes to show that there have been excuses made, including for enslavement of my people. And we're still dealing with the effects of that down to this day. Many people are just finding this out, but the reason why Christianity is so strong in the Black community is because it was pushed on us by slaveholders. But before they pushed it on us, they went to the Bible and they took out the books, like, for instance, like Exodus, and they made sure to teach the Bible about slaves loving their masters. They made sure to emphasize that part. But when it came to the stories about Moses delivering the people out of Egypt, along with Joshua, they didn't want people to read that. And this is why my ancestors were banned. It was considered illegal for them to learn how to read and write. And just in case they did, well, they had that slave Bible. They took the part about liberation out. And so this is why they will use religion as a tool to suppress people for whose ends. Because really, what happened to Africa because of those missionaries? Well, the government comes in and they start extracting all the wealth from these areas. Remember, we're talking about Burkina Faso here. Thankfully, there's been a role reversal, because now you have people like Captain Ibrahim Traore that have him, as well as the Burkinabe government, has switched things around and kicked out the French. But this is indicative of basically many African countries across the whole continent. They've been visited by missionaries, particularly European white missionaries. And then they teach them how to be the same missionaries to preach Christianity there, to be more accepting of the Europeans. And then the Europeans can come in and go, hey, we're with you guys. We're Christians too. And then the government takes over, and then they get to take all and strip them of all the resources. There's a reason why the phrase is religion is the opiate of the masses. Here's the thing, though. It doesn't mean that religion is bad. is that it can have an anesthetizing effect. There are cases where anesthesia or an anesthetizing is necessary, right? But there are cases where you need to be alert. The problem is they use that in conjunction with deadening the revolutionary potential of anyone to preserve their culture, their land, and their resources. And they use it in an adulterated way. And so this is the negative side of colonialism. It will use religion to its own ends to harm somebody. It's no different than an axe is used to cut down a tree, but you turn that axe and you use it on a person. So they perverted the use of religion in order to gain materially for their nation, for their government, for their corporations. And that's what makes it so evil. So this is why it's so important to read books like this. Because when I first saw this book, I was like, I don't know if I want to read this. But then as I'm continuing to read, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm seeing the intersection of colonialism and how he was raised. And this is why books like this are so important. This is why it is incumbent upon us to resist colonialism and its bastard child imperialism. So yeah. So what do you guys think? Let me know. Before you do, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you very much. We're going to go into the chat to give your thoughts on what we just read. And let me know. Let me check on the Rumble side. All right, looks like we're good on the Rumble side. All right, cool beans, Jelly Bean. And then we'll check to see if we have anybody in Kick. Ooh, all right. We do have some people in Kick. Very nice. All right. Let me see here. All right. So I already saw that. Kime and Miguel. Good, good. All right. We have Sean Rockers coming in on the Kick side. Beautiful. Thank you so very much. Good to have you all here. All right. Human Rights for All says truth. Thank you so very much, Human Rights for All. Thank you. So Human Rights for All says this was me in re-education. Ooh, I see. Travelers Wolf says Care Bear. Thank you very much. Travelers Wolf says, JB, you got to put book title and live video title when reading. Book title's in there. It says Chapter 5, Part 2 to Chapter 6, Part 1 of Water in the Spirit. John Freese, good to see you. You're the one that recommended the book. It says Stockholm Syndrome. That's exactly what I was trying to get. Yeah, Justice says Stockholm Syndrome. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's the attachment to the abuser. John Freese says Roman campus and Greek campus, Greco-Roman imperialism as the core of Western imperialism and colonialism. Yeah. Yeah. Because especially after Alexander the Great basically took over, massive parts of really North Africa, West Asia, and Europe. And then after that, then the Romans took over and became the largest long-lasting empire lasted for almost around 1,000 years. This is how we get nations like Britain, because it was actually an outpost of the Roman Empire called Britannia. So yeah, thank you very much for that, John Freese. Oh yeah, human rights for all is still being done 533 years later. John says dogmatic Christianity and dogmatic science is still being used to justify Western imperialism. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? All right, everybody. Thank you so very much for tuning in to this reading. I do apologize. I've been slacking on the reading part because I've just been busy with a lot of different things, taking care of myself, going to the gym, trying to do more on the ground stuff, especially in regards to mutual aid. I'll be going to an event tonight. So that's why I have a hard stop in a few minutes. But guys, just continue to keep reading. And I'll be getting into the next books of Prejudicial by Margaret Kimberly, as well as The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. So we'll be getting into those. Try to get into those more regularly so that I can cycle through those. But this is part of the channel. I'm always educating myself, and I want to invite you in as I continue to educate myself and to read more. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. And while we're at it, let's do this. I want to give a shout out, and I'll do a shout out again on Sunday, but I want to make sure I shout out the patrons on Patreon, because you guys make this happen. Thank you so very much. Here's are the tiers. You have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters. We have Comrades, Solidarity, and JB members. And thank you to brand new member Henry Wagner. Thank you so very much, Henry Wagner. Appreciate it very much for becoming a new channel contributor. It means the most to me because it literally keeps the lights on. Thank you so very much. And just to let you guys know, my channel is demonetized. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. So thank you so very much for that. All right, everybody. And please do not forget my link tree. It's also linked down in the description below. But if you guys would like to, I will also put it in a chat. I also have other socials. I just joined a new social media today called Upscroll. And Upscroll is it's created by people who are sick and tired of big corporations and these media conglomerates that are toying with algorithms in order to promote certain voices above another. And it's like if you took Instagram and if you took TikTok and meshed them together, and some of the developers are actually Palestinian. And so I just established an account today. So I'm going to try to see about posting more on there as well. And plus, as people know, the news that came out recently is that now TikTok is, I think, owned and ran by a Zionist now. So it's just a matter of time because they're going to try to suppress anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist speech, because ultimately that's what they want to do. They want to control the speech and the information because they don't really want us to really communicate with each other outside of their purview. So this is why it's important that we have new apps that circumvent that and that buck the system of, these complex algorithms to favor advertisers in capitalism. So I'm very happy about that. So it's called Upscrolled. So it's available on Apple App Store and Google Play Store. So I have an Android because I ain't got money like that, but I got it on Google Play Store. It does have a few bugs that they are trying to work out, but rest assured those bugs will be fixed, as soon as possible. So, but yeah, go ahead and give that a look if you guys would like to see about a new app to follow. And there's a lot of anti-imperialist voices that are jumping on. So I know Caitlin Johnstone's on there right now. She does great work too. So you guys go ahead and take a look at that. Now, time for me to head on out. I got to get ready to go. I got to put on some deodorant. It's muggy out here in Florida. It's muggy out in these streets. All right, everybody. So thank you so very much for taking time to listen to me read. And I just want to thank you guys for once again for staying for the reading. Look, water your plants, water yourselves, do all the things if you got them in. By the way, read, because reading is fundamental. And I love you guys for watching so very much. You guys take care. Have a good one. Forehead kisses for every single one of you. And keep learning, keep growing. I love you guys for watching. Have a great day. Thank you so much for watching. And I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here. One.